Now, I think it's fair to say that the Yamaha Tenere 700 has been the absolute benchmark in the middleweight adventure bike segment since it was introduced back in 2019. But for 2023, we've got a pair of brand new entrants from Honda and Suzuki, and on paper, they look like they could give the Tenere a run for its money. So in this battle of the specs, we'll go through all of the details, give them a score, and at the end, I'll tell you which bike I think will be the one to beat in 2023. First up, let's start with the engine, and they're all pretty similar in terms of architecture. I mean, they all use a parallel twin, they're within 100 cc's of each other, and they all get a 270-degree crank, which gives a nice feel and sound to this type of engine. But I think the key differentiator here is the Honda's free revving nature. You see, the bore and stroke of each engine will affect the way that it produces power, and generally the wider and shorter the dimensions, the more it'll enjoy being revved up for that peaky power. And so while the Tenere and V-Strom are pretty similar and biased more towards torque, the Transalp gets the more over square dimensions. The result, combined with the extra capacity over the Tenere, is about 20 more horsepower and still about 10 more than the Suzuki. And so if you're looking for a bike that's plucky when you give it the beans, then the Honda should probably be top of your list. Now, I've not had the chance to ride a Transalp yet, but I recently tested the new Hornet, which does use the same engine, and it was one of its standout features. It's plenty of fun considering it's a sub 7 gram bike, and it really does have a nice sound to it, which only enhances the sense of fun when you're pushing it hard. Now look, of course, with an adventure bike, you need it to be versatile, and so with the off-road side of adventure riding, you might be looking for more grunty torque in the low to medium revs. But I think the torque figures, at least on paper, look relatively comparable, whereas the Transalp has a clear advantage in terms of peak power. The other side of adventure riding is the touring and long distance capability, and while all three bikes have a fairly similar official fuel consumption figure, there's a bit of variance in the tank size, which will of course affect how long you can go between stops. The Tenere has the smallest, then the Transalp, and then the V-Strom has the largest at 20 litres. It is worth adding though that the World Raid edition of the Tenere comes with a 23-litre tank, but that bike is a fair bit more expensive than these options, and so I decided to use the standard bike in this comparison. Now I'm going to give the Honda the 3 points for its top-end power, decent torque, and decent range. The V-Strom is a close second because it's got that distance ability, but the power isn't as punchy. And then at the bottom of this one, we've got the Tenere. The engine is the least powerful, the least torquey. It doesn't get a slip assist clutch like the others, and it has the smallest tank. And so I've no option but to award it the 1 point. But I say that as someone who's a massive fan of both the Tenere 700 and the CP2 engine in general. But you'd expect these brand new 2023 engines to be a little better than one that's coming up for 10 years old now. Now, before we get on to the next category, in which I expect the Tenere to claw a few points back, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. If you're not already familiar, VPNs allow you to route your internet connection through a bunch of servers in different locations, and there are multiple benefits to doing so. Firstly, it offers enhanced security by encrypting all of your data, and that means that it can't be intercepted and misused without your knowledge. On top of that, they've got their new threat protection feature, which blocks malicious websites, malware, trackers, and ads so that your device can't be infected and compromised. But another big benefit to using a VPN is that with over 5,000 servers in 60 different countries, you can access content from all over the globe. Some countries block or limit certain sites, and some streaming services have a different catalog of content based upon your location, so you can unlock it by connecting to NordVPN in a given country. And with a relatively niche hobby like motorcycling, the more choice of content you have, the better chance you've got of finding something that you love watching. Honestly, it's a brilliant VPN service that we wholeheartedly recommend, and so check out the link in the description where you'll find a huge discount specifically for my viewers. And so once again, a huge thanks to NordVPN for making these videos possible. Now moving on to the chassis, and this is where the Tenere comes up good because it's widely regarded as an excellent bike to ride both on road and off for its exceptional handling and ruggedness. Firstly, it's the lightest of the bunch, and of course that's a huge deal if you're riding off road, but also it's the tallest at 800 275mm in the seat, and it gets 240mm of ground clearance. Combined with the 21-inch front spoke wheel and the 18 rear, some adjustability in the suspension, and a beautifully set up chassis, I think I'll have to give this one the 3. For 2 points, I've gone for the Transalp, despite the fact that it gets the most road-biased low-slung setup, and that's because it's really competitive on weight. Despite the fact that it packs more power and way more features that we'll get onto in a minute, it's still just 4 kilograms more than the Tenere, which I think is pretty impressive. Now, the V-Strom certainly has its advantages over the Transalp. It's got more travel, more ground clearance, more adjustability in the suspension, but the curb weight is quoted at 230 kilograms, which is a significant chunk more than the other two bikes. Granted, about 3 kilos of that could be fuel, as we're talking wet weights here, but still, that leaves about 20 kilograms elsewhere, which really is a significant sum. I still think it looks like it'll be a great bike to ride, and it could well have a bit of wow factor on the road, but at least on paper, that weight figure does look a little plump. Now, this next category will definitely depend on whether you're the sort of rider who likes tech and features, or if you prefer a very simple and stripped back machine, but I'm gonna score it assuming that more choice of features is a good thing. And so it has to be said that this is gonna be another low scoring category for the Tenere 700. It's always been a simple machine with no riding modes and no traction control, and for some riders, that's part of its appeal. For 2023, they have updated it though with a new vertical TFT display, an additional ABS mode, and some phone connectivity features, presumably as a bit of a response to these new bikes on the market. But look, when you set it against the impressive suite of features you get on the other two bikes, it's still not enough to put it on a par with them. The Suzuki is good for 2 points here with a TFT display, 4 riding modes, 3 levels of traction control, switchable ABS, a quick shifter, and Suzuki's easy start and low RPM assist features. Now, the Honda matches it in every department, but it does also get a couple more traction control settings, as well as some phone connectivity, self-canceling indicators, and their emergency stop signal feature. Again, I've had the chance to try a lot of this stuff out on the Hornet already, and it's a really impressive amount of stuff for a very competitive price point. But buying a bike isn't always something you do entirely by looking at the facts and figures and features, because you want something that's gonna light your fire when you open the garage door. Now, this category is highly subjective, but I will say that despite being a few years old now, the Tenere for me is the one that still does it. I really like that rally style front end, and the overall shape of the bike looks the most aggressive. Plus, I'm also a big fan of the new matte khaki paint scheme, which they just announced for 2023. The V-Strom sits in the middle for me. I like the boldness of the yellow and blue, which is sort of a semi-retro touch because it trickles down from the V-Strom 1050, which was inspired by the DR Big of the early 90s. And I think I also like the stacked headlights at the front, and the gold wheels, and the gold fork, and all in, I think it's quite a cool looking bike that stands out from the crowd. The Transalp is the bottom of my list here, and I'm a bit mixed about it. You see, looking at it in the throwback white, blue, and red color scheme with the gold wheels, I actually think it looks pretty decent, but I think the problem is that there's nothing particularly exciting about it. It's just inoffensive. For example, I wish they'd given us something other than black and grey as the other color options. They're just a bit too close for me, and so it feels like a missed opportunity to have something a bit more punchy. And also, the headlight is too similar to the CB500X, which is its smaller, cheaper sibling, and that always feels a bit budget. I think most buyers would prefer to get some of the looks of the next bike up in the lineup, so the Africa Twin, because then it'd feel like you're getting a little slice of a more premium bike, but perhaps without having to lay down all the cash. But look, you've got to make some compromises when it comes to building a very aggressively priced bike, and that's what I'm predicting with the Transalp. You see, the Tenere 700 comes in at $10,100 and the V-Strom at $10,499, both of which sound like great value for money. But look at the Hornet, which the Transalp shares a lot of components with, and it's far and away better value for money than either the GSX-8S or the MT-07, both of which are the Suzuki and Yamaha equivalents with the same engine and tech foundations as their adventure bike counterparts. And that's despite the Hornet getting more power, more features, and more tech. So while the Transalp price is yet to be announced, I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to nip in at something like 9,999 or something like that. So for now, I'm going to give it the 3 points, but obviously there's a massive asterisk and a big TBC, but I'd be massively surprised if it's more than the other two bikes. Now that makes it 8 to the V-Strom, 10 to the Tenere, and 12 to the Transalp. But of course, this is just a rough score and it assumes you weight all these categories equally. So let me know how you'd rank them down in the comments below and which one you'd most like to have in the garage. And if you want to see my full walkarounds directly from EICMA of both the Transalp and the V-Strom, then you can check out my full playlist from this year, which I'll link to right here. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.